To remove the access panel, first loosen the thumb screw at the rear of the panel. Grasp the handle on the side of the panel and pull slightly to the rear before pulling up on the back of the panel. Remove the panel from the unit. The access panel has several tabs on its side and leading edges, which fit into slots and over the front lip of the PC. There are also two tabs on the rear inside edge that slide into slots on the rear of the chassis. Note that the rear tabs can get bent easily and make it difficult to replace the panel. Before replacement, make sure the rear tabs are unbent and in a parallel position to the surface of the panel. There is also a small slot on the rear of the panel that a lock slot on the PC slides into. To reattach the panel, align the tabs on the panel over the corresponding slots on the PC. Slide the panel forward until the forward edge of the panel is flush against the main bezel. To remove the optical drive, first remove the access panel. Detach the power and data cables from the rear of the optical drive. Press on the green drive release latch at the rear of the drive and slide the drive out the front of the unit. If you are installing a new optical drive, pull the green drive release latch off of the optical drive. Insert a straightened paper clip or other similar tool into the force eject hole on the optical drive to eject the drive tray. Pry and push out on the tab securing the bezel to the optical drive and remove the bezel from the drive. The optical drive bezel has several tabs that fit into slots on the front of the optical drive. To install a new optical drive, press the old optical drive bezel onto the optical drive until the tabs are secured. There are two small pins on the green drive release latch that fit into two small holes on the side of the optical drive. Press the pins into their holes to secure the latch to the new optical drive. Slide the drive into its bay through the front of the PC until the green release latch snaps into place. Replace the power and data cables to the rear of the drive. To remove a PS2 and serial port module, if present in the unit, first remove the access panel. Remove the drive's cage if a graphics card is also installed in the unit. Lift the latch for the expansion card's retaining bracket and swing the bracket out. Remove the graphics card if installed in the unit. Detach the connector for the PS2 and serial port module from the motherboard. Carefully remove the module from the unit. To replace a PS2 and serial port module, align the back slot edge of the module into its position at the rear of the unit. Reattach the connector to the motherboard. Replace the graphics card if installed in the unit, being careful of the PS2 and serial port module connector under the card. Rotate the expansion card's retaining bracket into place to secure the module. To replace the system fan, first remove the access panel. Next, detach the fan connector to the motherboard. Remove the 3 Phillips No. 2 screws that attach the fan to the rear of the PC. Keep your hand on the fan as you remove the last screw to keep it from falling. Then pull the fan out of the PC. There is a hole on the bottom inside corner of the system fan that aligns over a small post on the rear of the PC. To replace the system fan, align the fan so it is blowing outward. The label on the fan should be facing out of the system. The connector should be aligned toward the bottom of the unit. Align the hole of the fan over its post, and align the screws of the fan with the screw holes at the rear of the PC. Secure the fan to the rear of the PC with its 3 Phillips No. 2 screws. Reattach the fan connector to the motherboard. To remove the main bezel or dust filter bezel, first remove the access panel. Unlatch the 3 side tabs of the main bezel and rotate the bezel away from the PC. Some units will have a dust filter bezel attached to the main bezel. To replace the main bezel or the dust filter bezel in these units, pry the 2 bezels apart until they separate. If installing a new dust filter bezel, press and snap the dust filter bezel onto the main bezel until all edges on the bezels are flush. The main bezel has 3 hooked tabs on the right side and 3 tabs with cutouts on the left side, which fit over tabs and over alignment posts on the chassis. To replace the main bezel, align the hooked tabs on the right side of the bezel over their tabs, then rotate and press the left side of the bezel until the cutout tabs snap over their posts. To remove the speaker, first remove the access panel and the main bezel. Swing up the drives cage for access to the motherboard. Detach the speaker connector to the motherboard. Remove the 2 Torx 15 screws at the front of the PC that secure the speaker to the front of the PC. Keep your hand on the speaker as you detach the second screw, and pull the speaker out of the unit. There are 2 small holes on the speaker that fit over alignment pegs on the front inside of the PC. To replace the speaker, press the speaker holes over their alignment pegs with the connector aligned toward the motherboard. Replace the 2 Torx 15 screws at the front of the unit to secure the speaker to the unit. Replace the speaker connector to the motherboard. Swing the drives cage back down into place. To remove the SD card reader, if present in the unit, first remove the access panel and the main bezel. Swing up the drives cage for access to the motherboard. Detach the SD card reader connector from the motherboard. Detach the Torx 15 screw securing the SD card reader to the front of the unit. Pull the reader out of the front of the unit. The SD card reader has 2 small holes that fit over alignment pegs at the front of the unit. To replace an SD card reader, feed its connector in through the front of the unit and press the holes on the reader over their pegs. Secure the reader to the front of the unit with its Torx head screw. Reattach the SD card reader connector to the motherboard. Swing the drive's cage back down into place. To remove the drive's cage, first remove the access panel. Detach the power and data connectors from the hard drive or drives in the cage. Push the cables down completely toward the motherboard area. Disconnect the power and data connectors from the optical drive. Lift the inside edge of the cage slightly, slide the cage toward the center of the unit, and lift it out of the PC. There are two small pegs on each side of the drive's cage. That slide into slots on the frame of the PC. To replace the drive's cage, insert the two front side pegs of the cage into their slots. Slide the cage forward while swinging down the inside edge of the cage. Replace the power and data cables to the optical drive. Pull the hard drive cables back up from the motherboard area to the cage. Replace the power and data cables to the hard drive or drives installed in the cage. To remove the hard drive, first remove the access panel and the drive's cage. Detach the two Torx 15 screws, one on each side, that secure the hard drive to the drive cage. Slide the drive toward the center of the cage and pull it out of the cage. If replacing the hard drive, detach the two remaining Torx 15 guide screws on the sides of the hard drive and reserve. To install a new hard drive, attach the two reserved Torx 15 guide screws to the sides of the new hard drive. The two guide screws on the hard drive align into slots on the drive's cage. Align the side screws of the drive into their slots with the hard drive spindle side down. Then tip the hard drive down into place. Secure the hard drive to the cage with the two Torx 15 screws toward the center of the cage. To remove an expansion card if present in the unit, first remove the access panel and the drive's cage. Detach any internal connectors to other system components. Lift the latch for the expansion card's retaining bracket and swing the bracket out. Press on the latch for the PCI x16 slot on the motherboard if removing a card from the PCI x16 slot. Carefully pull out the expansion card. To replace an expansion card, carefully align and push the card into its slot on the motherboard until it is fully seated. If installing a graphics card and a serial PS2 module is installed, be careful not to trap the serial PS2 module connector under the card. Rotate the expansion card's retaining bracket back into place to secure the card. Attach any internal connectors necessary to other system components. To remove the power supply, first remove the access panel, the main bezel, and the drive's cage. Detach all power supply connectors to the motherboard. Note that the motherboard connectors have a latch that must be pressed to release the connectors. Snip the two plastic cable ties that secure the power supply connectors to the front metal of the chassis. Detach the 3 Torx 15 screws that connect the power supply to the PC. Press the latch at the inside edge of the power supply in the unit and slide the power supply into the PC before fully removing it from the unit. There is a slot on the side of the power supply that slides over a large tab on the side wall of the chassis. To replace the power supply, align the power supply slot slightly behind the chassis tab. Then slide the power supply back until it locks into place next to the latch. Reattach the 3 Torx 15 screws at the rear of the chassis. Secure the power connectors to the front of the chassis with 2 plastic cable ties. Note that the bottom cable tie should be the only cable tie to secure both sets of cables. Reconnect all power connectors to the motherboard. To replace system memory, first remove the access panel and the drives cage. Simultaneously push down on the clips on either side of the DDR4 DIMM socket to release the memory module. Carefully pull out the memory module. There is one notch on the bottom of every DDR4 DIMM module, offset from the center, that fits over a tab in the DDR4 DIMM memory socket. When installing DDR4 DIMMs, align the notch on the module with the tab in the socket. Press the module into the socket until the clips on both sides of the socket lock into place. To remove the heatsink, first remove the access panel and the drives cage. Detach the heatsink connector to the motherboard. Loosen the 4 captured Torx 15 screws for the heatsink and gently pull the heatsink out of the PC. Before replacing the heatsink into the system, first clean off the old thermal grease from the microprocessor. Clean the grease from the heatsink if you are replacing the same heatsink into the system. Apply new thermal grease or a thermal pad to the microprocessor. Align the 4 screws of the heatsink over the 4 screw holes on the motherboard with the connector aligned toward the top of the unit. Tighten the 4 Torx 15 heatsink screws. Replace the heatsink connector to the motherboard. To remove the CPU, first remove the access panel, the drives cage, and the heatsink. Press down to release the CPU load lever from its retention tab, and pull the load lever and load plate away from the socket. identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Line up the pin 1 corner of the Intel CPU removal replacement tool over the socket. Press down on the plunger of the removal tool to pick up the CPU from the socket and remove the tool and the CPU from the motherboard. To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow mark on the corner of the chip assembly. Make sure the Intel CPU staging tool side pins are set to the correct socket type for the CPU. For this unit, it is LGA1151. Place the CPU into the Intel CPU staging tool. When correctly inserted, the small notches on the side of the CPU should align over the side pins on the staging tool. Place the removal replacement tool over the stage, lining up the pin 1 triangles on each tool. Press down on the removal replacement tool to pick the CPU up from the stage. Align the removal replacement tool again to pin 1 on the motherboard CPU socket. Press the plunger on the removal replacement tool to release the CPU into the socket. Swing the load plate down. Lock the load lever under its retaining tab to secure the microprocessor into place. To remove the wireless LAN antennas, first remove the access panel, the main bezel, and the drives cage. Carefully snap off the antennas from the wireless LAN board. Pull the rear antenna cable from the small cable tunnel at the top of the chassis. There is a hooked tab securing the rear antenna cover into place. Squeeze the tab to release the hooked side of the cover and pull the cover off of the unit. Detach the Torx 15 screw for the rear antenna and pull the antenna out of the rear of the unit. Pull the front antenna cable out of the front of the unit through the front unit grill. Free the front antenna from the cable guides at the front of the unit. Detach the Torx 15 screw for the front antenna and remove the front antenna from the unit. Each antenna has a small hole that fits over a small locator peg on the front or rear of the PC. To replace the front antenna, align the hole on the antenna over its alignment peg. Secure the front antenna with its Torx 15 screw. Place the front antenna cable into the cable guides at the front of the unit. Feed the front antenna cable back into the inside of the unit through the small hole marked ANT. Feed the rear antenna in through its access hole at the rear of the unit. Align its hole over its peg and secure the rear antenna with its Torx 15 screw. The rear antenna cover has two small tabs on one side and a hooked tab on the other that fit into slots on the rear of the unit. To replace the cover, insert the two tabs into their slots, then press the hooked tab into its slot until the cover is securely in place. Place the rear antenna cable into the small cable tunnel on the top inside of the chassis. Replace the antennas to the wireless LAN board. The antennas are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board. To remove the wireless LAN board, first remove the access panel and the drives cage. Carefully snap off the antenna connectors from the wireless LAN board. Detach the Phillips number 1 screw securing the wireless LAN board in place. The board will pop up. Remove the board. The wireless LAN board has a notch offset from the center that aligns over a key in its motherboard socket. To replace the wireless LAN board, angle the board into its motherboard socket at a 30-degree angle and press down. Hold it down while replacing the screw. Replace the antenna connectors to the board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board. CMOS factory settings should be restored as a first step before replacing the system motherboard. To restore CMOS factory settings, first remove the access panel. Remove the battery from the motherboard. Wait 30 seconds. Replace the battery to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings are now reset. Note that you will now need to enter System BIOS and reset the clock in BIOS after this procedure. To remove the motherboard, first remove the access panel, the main bezel, and the drives cage. Remove any expansion cards or riser modules, system memory, and the wireless LAN board. Remove the SD card reader if installed in the unit. Remove the heatsink and the CPU. When removing the CPU, install a socket cover on the load plate window before replacing the load plate over the socket. Detach all system connectors to the motherboard. Remove the 7 Torx 15 screws that attach the motherboard to the PC. Slide the motherboard toward the front of the unit. Tip the rear of the motherboard up and carefully remove it from the unit. Place the motherboard in an anti-static bag. To replace the motherboard, carefully tip the front edge of the motherboard into the unit. Clear connectors away from under the motherboard and place the motherboard entirely down, sliding the rear connector ports into their cutouts on the rear of the chassis. Replace the 7 Torx 15 screws to secure the motherboard to the unit. Replace all connectors to the motherboard.